Okay, now I'd like to call to order the special study session of November 4th, 2024 at 6:48 PM. Our special study session business starts with 2025 legislative agenda. I call on Communications Director Carmen Palmer and City Administrator Jason Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll turn it directly over to Carmen.
All right, and not to keep passing it on, but actually, our lobbyist, Bill Clark, is gonna start us off.
Sure. Good evening, everybody, Mayor and council members. I'm Bill Clark, and so I represent you down in Olympia in the legislature. I'll give you kind of an overview of what the 2025 legislature looks like, and then some discussion about tomorrow's events and what that could mean for the 2025 session. So first off, kind of the key dates to keep in mind. The 2025 session starts January 13th. This year, in even numbered years like 2025, the legislature has its long legislative session, which by the Constitution is 105 days long. It's the year when the state's required to adopt three different budgets: the operating budget, the transportation budget, and the capital budget. Adopting the budgets is really the only thing the legislature is required to do. Everything else is just a bonus, right? The legislature can adopt things to make your lives easier. They can adopt things that make your lives harder. And so what we try to do is figure out what are the things we can put on the agenda to make it better to be a city, better to be a city council member, a communications director, a city manager, et cetera, and try to talk them out of things that make it harder to deliver value to the citizens here at Sumner. So the 13th is the first day of session. It's scheduled to be done middle of April or so. I think during the session, there'll be opportunities if you want to come down to Olympia and talk to your representatives down there, either through the Association of Washington Cities Day, or if there's a specific day that we want to have folks down just to talk about City of Sumner issues, we can do that too. It's actually somewhat fun to tromp around the Capitol for the day and meet people and stuff like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can set that up during the session this year. What the session looks like starting in 2025, of course, will depend on what happens tomorrow. And regardless of the elections, there's going to be a huge amount of transition in Olympia. Obviously, at the governor's level, Governor Inslee's been around for 12 years. He's leaving office. I'll give you what I think the polling looks like. It's polling you've probably read in the paper. I've seen some polling that's not been in the paper. Pretty clear that Bob Ferguson, the current Attorney General, will likely be the next governor. There'll be a huge amount of transition in his office with his advisors. The governor's office has policy matter advisors on different issues. There'll be a lot of transition there. There'll be appointment of new state agency directors. The transition at the executive branch level kind of means that the executive branch is kind of slow to get going in the first year of a new governor's term, right? You've had the Inslee administration in power for 12 years now with their agency directors, their legislative directors, their legislative agendas. All that's going to change, right? New governor, new look at a lot of different issues. In addition, there'll be a lot of change at the legislative level too, regardless of what the elections are. Especially in the state senate. State senate has 49 state senators. There's 49 legislative districts in Washington, 1 Senate member, 2 House members. I think of the 49 districts, there'll be at least 9 new members of the Senate. Some because they're not running for office, some because they're running for higher office and they're going to win. There'll be a couple appointments when people resign at the end of the year. When you have that much transition, 9 members out of 49, it means you're going to have a lot of new committee chairs. That has to be determined in early December. You'll have a new majority leader. Senator Billig, who's from Spokane, has been majority leader. He's not running for re-election. The likely majority leader will be Senator Jamie Peterson, who's a senator from Seattle. I'll say he may have some sympathy for Sumner because he's a Puyallup guy growing up. I guess we'll find out. He's a highly qualified, very, very highly skilled legislator. And again, this is like what we kind of hear in Olympia, who's likely to be the next majority leader, probably will be Senator Peterson. But because of the transition and new committee chairs, there'll be a new committee structure. Again, kind of like the executive branch, they won't be super fast out of the gate, right? Because you'll have all new makeups of those different committees. Probably less transition leadership-wise in the House. But in the House, you typically have a lot more new members, whereas in the Senate, a lot of the new Senate members will be House members who are running for election to move from the House to the Senate. So you have experienced legislators They're just gonna be in slightly different roles. In terms of the makeup of the legislature, which in part can drive kind of what the agenda is and what can get passed, the current state senate is 29 Democrats, 20 Republicans. The polling indicates that Democrats will pick up at least one, maybe 2 or 3 seats. In the House, it's 58 to 40. Again, the polling indicates that Democrats will pick up 1 to 2 or 3 seats. So it'll be continued Democratic control. They'll pick up a few more seats. Exactly how many we'll see. I don't think that really changes the agenda all that much, right? Looking at kind of key issues that will, I think, impact cities and be of interest to cities. Housing and homelessness is at the top of the agenda again. I think the number one issue in that front will be some form of rent control, or what the proponents call rent stabilization, a limit on the amount that landlords can increase rent on an annual basis. There'll be another look at the transit-oriented development bill that we worked on quite a bit, so that the transit-oriented development zoning didn't conflict with the town center zoning that was already done here in the city of Sumner. Second big issue will be the budget. Growth in the state revenue has not gone down. I mean, the growth has gone down. There's not a reduction in state revenue. There's just a reduction in the level of growth. And the federal COVID money that was kind of propping up the state budget, that's gone. And there's a new collective bargaining agreement with state employees that has to be funded by the legislature. They either vote it up or down. They can't change it. So whatever it is, however that's negotiated, that's kind of what the state funds. So revenue-wise, it's not going to be a great budget year. And then on top of that, there are a couple of the initiatives that are on the ballot tomorrow that could impact the budget. Of the 4 initiatives on the budget, again, the polling indicates the one most likely to pass is 2066, which is the initiative that would roll back a bill passed last year transitioning Puget Sound Energy out of natural gas service over time, and changing some of the building code, the state building code's energy provisions that essentially limit the use of natural gas in new homes. That's probably the initiative most likely to pass. I say that because the polling indicates it's at like 49% yes with 20% undecided. Just 2 or 3% of the undecideds go yes, then that initiative passes. The 2 initiatives that could impact the budget, one is 2117, which is the Climate Commitment Act. Climate Commitment Act is what established the state's Cap and Invest program, where the major emitters of carbon buy allowances to emit carbon at auction. That auction revenue has been used to fund a number of things. Transportation, kind of mass transit, bike trails, EV charging, a lot of natural climate solutions, meaning floodplains and things like that, salmon restoration, some of the culvert funding comes out of the Climate Commitment Act. I don't think that's likely to pass. Polling indicates that it's not going to. The campaign's really focused on what the fiscal impacts are on the state if that funding goes away. The other initiative that has fiscal impacts is 2124, which is the initiative that would repeal the state's capital gains tax. There's a capital gains tax on capital assets, mainly investments. It doesn't apply to real estate. It was passed a few years ago. If that passes, it would put a $500 to $800 million hole within the state's budget. So again, I think the trend on that and the polling I've seen is that it's not going to pass. But even if those 2 revenue-related initiatives don't pass, the budget's going to be in a tough spot just because of how it's been propped up by some of the COVID money, and then just some of the cyclical things we're seeing in the reduction in the growth of state revenue really over the last 4 years. So that's kind of the overview of the budget and what it looks like for next year. January 13th when we kick it off, and like everybody says, make sure you get your ballots in, and then we'll see how it goes. And I think Carmen's going to walk through kind of what we've drafted as the beginning for the legislative agenda.
Yes, so what has worked in the past is I kind of walk through it, and then Bill adds any commentary. I'll stop at every session, but also poke me if I'm going way astray. He knows better than I do. Even though they might be slow out of the gate, we don't want to be slow getting our agenda to our legislators before they enter all that lovely change in world that they have January 13th. So that's why it's before you now, so that we can get it passed at the next council meeting and get it out to our legislators and our partners. It's also good for a lot of our partners to know where the city of Sumner is. That is just an overview. That is the purpose of the legislative agenda, is to tell our legislators and primarily the state how the choices they're making either benefit Sumner or maybe not so much help us. A lot of people will say government. and miss that government is lots of different jurisdictions. We are not one big whole. So this is our communications tool to the state legislature and our legislators about what we would like and what we would like them to do or not do. It is also our mechanism to let our partners know, neighboring jurisdictions. I'm not sure if everyone knows, we are in the 31st legislative district for the state. I did find out in a recent redistricting, we are also a tiny piece of Sumner is in the 25th district. It is our cemetery. I don't care, I'll take it. The 25th actually always paid a lot of attention to Sumner when we go and speak to them, meet with them. We are always meeting with both the 31st and the 25th, so they have always been very generous at realizing even though there's an imaginary boundary right between us, we are right on the line. So they were always great partners, and it's nice that they actually do have a little piece of Sumner they represent. This also tells the public and reminds the public how things at the state may or may not be affecting their city. And we really, as we encourage everyone to go vote, we also encourage people to watch what's going on during a state legislative session, maybe even go down and testify. You don't even have to testify the same way the city's testifying. You can disagree with us. But we do want people to be more educated on how these bills are affecting them at the local level, because it can get daunting, it can get overwhelming. Speaking of overwhelming, the last couple sessions have had record-breaking numbers of bills passed. That wreaked a little bit of havoc with our goal of having a nice, tidy, easy to follow legislative agenda, but we tried to balance the number of topics we believe are coming before this session as well, with keeping it succinct enough to be understandable. As Bill was saying, and if you've met any of our current or past state legislators, they also are facing avalanches of bills, so they need quick information to know how it's affecting the people back home in Sumner, part of their jurisdiction. So with that, our top thing is enhanced transportation. Go figure. We actually have been getting a lot of money over the years out of the state. Last year, we did get $500,000 for design on the River Grove pedestrian bridge. So transportation has been a wonderful asset to us to keep communicating with our legislators what we need as far as transportation projects, understanding the world that Bill just described. Under that, we have the River Grove pedestrian bridge. Again, they had just helped us fund design. We actually got another grant from another source. So if they are throwing any transportation money around, and we realize that's probably a big if, that would be our ask out of transportation, would be to keep moving toward construction for the River Grove pedestrian bridge. Our second ask would be our ask out of local capital projects. That's not in transportation. That's where legislators submit projects within their district. For that, we are actually asking for the Stewart Road Bridge replacement. As we know with projects, that one's moving forward, but every time we think something's funded, the costs come in higher. So this is to help us bridge that gap for a bridge. We also are not ready in the process for any big asks for the 166 interchange. We are in design right now. But we did add, just so they know we are still moving that project forward, we did add city culverts. As I was looking at this, I realized I had forgotten to ask Michael to give me another sentence on this. So when it comes to you for the final, we will probably add at least another sentence or a couple more details of what we're asking for culverts. The final one had a lot of debate. This is actually WSDOT's, and I really hesitated on using some of our very limited space and time and energy when getting in front of our legislators to talk about what's really a WSDOT project. But we met with WSDOT, and the issue they're under is they are a state agency, so they feel they can only ask when asked a question, they can only answer. So what they pointed out is lots of other projects across the state are also costing a lot more than they were originally anticipated. Some of the ways they solved that problem in the legislature is to delay 167 projects and then take the funding from that and put it to these other projects. So especially with one new at least representative and the 31st being on the ballot, we wanted to remind them that they have to sometimes fight for 167 because that world in WSDOT's budget is so many different projects fighting for the limited pot of dollars. So that's what that last one is for. There was a plan done on SR 167. They are under a mantra, finish what you start. I think they're mostly applying that to construction projects, but we're also trying to remind them that if they let a plan sit, it doesn't last. And we don't want a situation where they spend all the time and energy to build a plan for 167 and then it sits so long, it's no longer useful. So that's why that last item is there. Anything I missed?
On transportation, the transportation budget is in pretty rough shape. And that's because cost overruns of some of the big projects is part of the problem. Secondly is the state's under an obligation under the so-called culverts decision to replace culverts that block fish passage under state highways. The cost overruns just on that settlement have gone up by about 5 billion, right? Just 5 billion for this next cycle. And likely that means they're gonna have to go back to court and figure out what this funding obligation of the state is, because that's driven by a federal court injunction. And then third, gas tax revenue continues to kind of flatten out, right? As people buy more EVs, drive less, efficiency goes up, people buy less gas, you get less gas tax revenue, you don't have as much money to pay for transportation. So I think our thinking is to identify like the core kind of 4 transportation projects that have a chance of getting funded. And then, you know, like Carmen said, even though the 167 implementation is a WashDOT priority, because it is a WashDOT priority, that gives it another level of kind of chances of getting funded. Some of the other projects I think we had on the list for a couple years, and the one last year for River Grove ended up getting funded just because you keep asking for it, right? You don't get what you don't ask for. And so you don't exactly know going into the session what the best opportunity is, but it's kind of like identify your top 4 and then see what your opportunities are. So that's the thinking.
I was wondering, you're talking about design for 500,000. How close is that number? Is it, to me, it sounds like a lot of money, but is that really?
Oh, and I don't think that was even the, the whole amount. I think that's what we got out of the state. Michael is back there. I know he can correct me if I'm wrong, but
It was the gap.
Yep.
To get us to the end of final design. So I can't remember exactly what the total was, but it was somewhere around $1 million. For the design of the bridge structure.
and design funding is key because there's always this trick. Everyone wants to fund actually building something, the tangible, right? We want to see some concrete going down on the ground if we're spending millions. The problem is nobody also wants to fund a poorly designed project. So that design funding moves a project forward, but it also helps line us up to then go for the construction dollars to actually get it done. But it's always a hard sell because someone wants to see something at the end of the day.
I was just curious how close it was, but.
Thanks, Bill, for all your work on our
I
wants.
think we have a question from Andy.
I did have a question. Is that all right?
Okay. go
Yeah, I was
ahead.
just curious, Carmen and Bill. So on this agenda, we're going through it, and are you looking for us to give feedback on how we'd like to present it, or ask questions, or what my sound questions, obviously, but like, are we? Is this something you draft and we can make changes on, or what do you tell me how that works? A little bit?
Yes, thank you for that reminder. So what happens is when a session starts, like Bill said, it could start slow, but then sometimes things move fast. This last session, things were moving at like, 3 a.m. right before the cutoff. The mayor and staff are only allowed to speak on things as the council has determined. That's when we may speak for the city of Sumner. So this document and this exercise is where you all are giving us your feedback on what you want us to focus on and how you want us to speak for that, because we don't often have time. They're, hey, there's a hearing on this in an hour. Can you join in? And the mayor is great about joining in, sometimes even our staff, but we need that direction from you. So that's what's starting here tonight, is to get that direction from you. These are our best things to bring forward to you, but right now tonight we're seeking any feedback. So if you have any questions, any changes you'd like, this would be the time, and then we'll bring back a final draft with any of those changes for you to vote on.
I'll just add, I'll just add that this is really meant to be a high-level policy document. What is your high-level policy goal? And that gives us some latitude to respond rather quickly to these bills that are dropping, because it is not uncommon that we are getting called with less than 24 hours notice to provide input. So we don't always have time to come back to council. So we don't want this so specific that it ties our hands either. So think of this as overarching.
Okay, thank you. I did have one question,
Go ahead.
just on the first part. Is the order these are presented indicate the priority level, or just, it's really just the 4 top things?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Ready for the next section?
We have 3 more sections to
Yep.
go through.
So, nice try. The next one, provide reasonable funding and support for cities. This is a very, as Jason just said, very broad category. And here's the reason why. We are seeing so many bills each session that we didn't even anticipate. Some we do anticipate, a lot we don't anticipate. That are, for lack of a better word, the most succinct way, micromanaging how cities operate. And that puts cities in a really awkward, unfortunate place. It's not just a power struggle, it's that the public still looks to the cities to be able to respond to their needs and their questions and their concerns. And more, the decision-making is transferring up to the state. And as much as we encourage people to go to Olympia and get involved in the process, there's no denying that is a harder thing to do than to call City Hall or see one of you at Fred Meyer or come to a meeting like this. So we are encouraging the state to, really question this general trend we've been seeing over the years. And the Association of Washington Cities has some great statistics that, 80% of the public are still looking to local cities. And I know there was one recent situation where land use thing where the state changed and kind of tied our hands. And I know Jason received an email from a gentleman saying, I can't believe you can't help us. And that's we see that becoming a growing trend, and we'd like to see that be a shrinking trend from the state where they act more in partnership with us rather than supplanting city control. With that overview, these are the ones we're specifically concerned about or wishing for. Liability. We keep seeing policies that would actually drive additional claims and litigation against the city, especially in law enforcement and public safety. So this is, we're echoing right here directly AWC, the Association of Washington Cities, really encouraging our state to think about some of those probably very well-intentioned efforts, but what they're actually doing that is probably not intentional is driving up our insurance premiums so high that many brokers have completely left the state. And that's not a good situation for the city. It's not a good situation for our residents. The second one is the 1% cap. Cassandra actually explained this at the regular council meeting where a lot of people, even experts I hear in the media, believe people's property taxes are capped at 1%, not that the city's ability to collect revenue from property taxes is capped at 1%. So, when we see those, valuations going up 4-7%, which means we're seeing, 4-7% inflation on all our costs, and we can only raise our costs 1%, that creates that gap you've been studying through the whole budget cycle, and it's not sustainable. Whether or not this one goes or not, who knows? But we have it on there just to keep reminding people of that structural instability that we face every year. Fund Parks and Recreation. This is RCO, stands for the Recreation and Conservation Office. They do a process where we apply for grants from them. They do a ranking list. We are on that list for the Bill Keith Sports Complex, adding turf fields, LED lights, and more. We're hearing through the grapevine that perhaps some of that funding with all the volatile things Bill was explaining might be in danger. So just trying to remind our legislators of the importance of parks. This next one was on there from last year, and I am not even going to try to pronounce what PFAS stands for. You'll see it there. I have to add a space between the hyphen and the and. But these are the forever chemicals that are in that are being banned. But again, we don't want the work to on our wastewater end to fall solely on the city. It's mandates like that that drive up utility bills, and then you get comments about utility rates. So just trying to remind the state and the federal government that while we're in this together on PFAS, all the responsibility and the cost shouldn't land squarely on the cities. The next one is pretty straightforward. Public Works Trust Fund is a fund we and many other cities use to fund projects, and then we pay it back, and then that goes and funds other public works projects. Sometimes when budgets get tight, that looks like an easy place to find money for legislators. So just kind of reminding them politely, Please don't. And then the last one, updating public records laws. This is another return. Public records laws are there for a very good reason, for the public to access their records that we have. Unfortunately, some people use it to try to purposefully gain money on lawsuits or to put in very vague requests that monopolize staff time on their requests, so then we can't get to the actual requests other people have. So just looking for a little balance there so that our records actually we are able to provide records in a timely and easy manner to our public. Anything on this section you want to add?
Only on as to the budget revenue situation the state has, I think tax increases will definitely be on the table. I think the leading new idea is what's being described as a payroll tax. I think people are aware Seattle has what they call a payroll tax. That is not a tax on income, it's on the payroll of the business. So some people think it's an income tax, but it really functions on high earning employees of certain businesses of a certain size. The state is looking at that for 2025 as a new payroll source, or as a new tax source, looking at high-end payrolls. So I think that's the most likely kind of new revenue source that'll be debated. I think when that gets debated, you'll see cities and also counties pointing out that, you know, you can't just solve the state's revenue issues, you've also got to look at city and county revenue too. Because I think there's, you know, far more constraints on cities and counties on raising revenue than there is on the state. So that's going to be one of the more fascinating issues for the session.
Anything else?
Go ahead.
I just want to go back to the transportation. You know, Sumner was the lead agency to do the Traffic Avenue and that interchange. And is there any way to kind of show that in the document that we are a leader in, you know, on this 167 implementation? Because I think that shows, I mean, the state wasn't going to get to it for eons. So I think we need to get some credit for showing that we're progressive and we go and we do manage big projects like that.
Thank you, that's a good point. And at the SR 410-166 interchange we referenced, we are also leading that project.
Yeah.
So we were doing the exact same thing on that one. So let me see if there's a place for me to fit it in. One thing we were thinking with the constraints of all these topics and, you know, trying to keep it brief enough people looked, is I will probably have some either online or some handouts when we go visit of a little more information on each one. And I will definitely get it there. I know WashDOT staff did send us some information to include as well about 167, about, you know, regionally how impacted that is, because, you know, if you're a legislator in Seattle, you're seeing 405 and you're seeing 520 and you're like, what are you talking about, Sumner? So we want some hard facts as well to back up our words. So if I can't fit it in, I'll see what I can do to fit it in here, and if I can't fit it in here, it will be in the supplementary.
Because it, you know, it really made a huge impact on how traffic flows.
Oh, yes, I don't think any of us hesitate in wanting to keep reminding them we did that work for them.
That's what thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Our-
A couple of comments. On the improved public safety one, I really appreciate the ones about the limiting liability. I think that's a big issue and a big cost for cities and businesses. And then also the public records thing, I think that's a lot of time. I looked at the budget, I think we added a full-time employee a couple years ago. So like that's a pretty significant increase in cost just managing that, and it seems like it's getting worse. I do really support the 1% cap on property tax. I think it's very helpful for citizens and people who have fixed incomes to have a predictable amount of their taxes don't go up with the 1%. I get that, but it does. I do think that restraint. I support that. So I think the voters support it. I know that the city's working through their budget. I thought we were able to come up with ways of solving our problem and kind of looking at some long-term things outside of property tax. I don't know if I have support from the council, but I really would like to eliminate that one. I'd like to add something a little more. The PFAS one, to me, is great. I think that it deals with the idea of more regulation costing more money. The city has to implement it without any additional funding. I think that, to me, I'm curious if we should address things like, I think a lot of the things that we're dealing with on energy efficiency are also costing us more money. I'm looking at some of the requirements for electric vehicles and getting EV chargers and all that stuff. Those are very expensive to the city. And to me, they go along the same lines as the PFAS. So I was curious if that would be something, because I would prefer to try to say, hey, let's keep our 1% cap on property taxes. I know AWC supports it and lots of people support it. I like government spending to stay down, and I think we can be creative, because I think people's housing costs are going up faster than they need to as well, and the city can help with that by spending less money. So, anyways, those are my comments. It's just I'd love to see if we could kind of expand the PFAS one to be more than just PFAS, to deal with energy efficiency or other mandates that cost money to provide funding with them. And then I'm not really, again, I like the 1% cap. So those are my comments.
Okay, so let me address this. I'm gonna go second first. I do have some language on the back that, now that I'm looking at this again, could maybe move to under that section. One thing we wanted to remind them is they come up with laws, and I'm sure at the state this looks wonderful on paper. They usually, if they have a new mandate that costs the city, then they usually offer some grants, and they're like, well, then it doesn't cost the city. The piece they're missing is the logistics that, like you said, we usually have to add another person to do that job. And even if they provide grant funding that partially or fully funds their salary, what they're missing is that we have no more space left in City Hall. Today, I got the last parking spot in the employee parking, and I'm sure more employees were coming after me. I also had to.
I didn't get a spot today.
And at about 3:30, no joke, there was a line for the bathroom. I looked at my fellow employees, and thanks to some of my clearance, I can use the police station. So I sprinted downstairs and left everybody else to their own devices. But what they're missing is those type of logistics that even if they provide the salary, the logistics of having to bring another person in that further puts the pressure on city facilities, that type of thing, I think they're missing. So I think that might be a way to also further flesh out, not just PFAS, but any other, even if it's a funded mandate funded through FTEs, it rarely captures the full cost that the city faces logistically. As to the 1%, I open it up and see what other kind of feedback, whether we keep that on here or pull it.
Anybody have any?
Well, I just have a comment on that topic that you just talked about. It makes it very hard if the state is mandating your statement of work, but then you have to stay within your budget. You can't do that in your household budget, and many businesses don't do that. In fact, they do a reduction in force, but you can't keep your budget the same and have the state mandate. So I understand what this is saying, and I do think you could make it broader than just PFAS, but I get it. So I understand why you're saying that. As far as the 1% cap on city property tax, it says with a limit not to exceed 3%, but that doesn't mean we have to take it. Doesn't mean we have to raise things. It just means it gives an option in the future if there are no other means. Now, we know there's going to be other means. I mean, we live here. I understand what he's saying. He's speaking, to my demographic. I mean, fixed income, right? Retired. So, and there's a lot of people that are basically on what I'd call a fixed income because you just have your money coming in, every month. So you can only work so many jobs. But I don't see us, I see us wanting to adjust the 1% cap and have it tied to inflation, because the city suffers at the hands of inflation just like the rest of us do. So that's what I'm hearing you say. Am I accurate in that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm fine leaving it as it stands. It just means that we would have to talk about this and understand it if it was ever going to be raised. It's not just an automatic that it gets raised.
Correct. You vote on your property tax rate every single year. You just did so tonight for next year. This gives you more flexibility. And, the problem is when the law changed 20-ish years ago and you've only been collecting 1%, you are so far behind all that lost CPI in property tax. You'll never catch up. Even if you go 3%, let's just say inflation stays at 3%, you keep on taking that 3%, you've still lost 20 years of that growth of compounding interest, right? So it's a good step in the right direction, but it does not solve it. I mean, if you look at 3%, 1% tonight was $42,000 or $49,000. 3% is less than 150,000. Our costs are still going up much faster than that, as you all know.
And with that being said, I agree with Andy about being creative instead of just levying more
Absolutely.
taxes. So I do agree with him on that. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I'd keep the three, I'd like to still keep the option for up to 3% because, you know, like all the tough decisions we had to make about, you know, we had 600,000 and like I came up with $1 million that would, and it didn't even cover all the options that we really needed. So I think it's something that I would like to still see it kept there.
All right. So we'll move on to utility
No,
discussion.
we're actually still not done.
There's
there,
a
I'm
page
sorry.
two.
We're not.
So just to back up, what I'm
Okay.
hearing is there's enough
Going.
council members that have expressed that they're interested in keeping it. Councilmember Elfers, if you wish to make an amendment, staff will help you with the amendment.
Well, before you move on, I'll just weigh in on it. In that to me, the 1% is just really not enough. But I'm one of those council members that really want to spend a whole lot more than what we had. And it's just what we had in the budget allocated for 25, 26. And it's just because there's some things that I think really should be done. And the 1% is a small amount, 3% is small, a little bit more, but still small. And so I think I like the option, I do like the option of the ability to go to 3% as opposed to always having the 1%. That's it.
I think there's some things I can do looking at the wording to if the council would like, keep it in here, but also address some of Councilmember Elfer's concerns that it's an option if needed, not to just keep getting more and more and more out of people. So there might be a little bit of a way to keep it in, but also incorporate some of Councilmember Elfer's concerns.
Anybody else?
So we'll leave it in. Councilmember Elfers, if you want an amendment or anybody else, please get a hold of staff. And we'll move on to the back page of this, which is public safety.
All right, I will try to get through this quickly. Improve public safety. This is by no means less important. It's just where it fit on the page. It's kind of like a puzzle trying to get these 4 items together. The first one, you probably have heard a lot about. A lot of cities are mentioning this. When that RCW passed, juveniles, are required to consult an attorney before cooperating. The law made no differentiation between juveniles who are suspects and juveniles who are witnesses or even victims. So it is really slowing down and even further victimizing some of our juveniles to not be able to speak to officers in a timely manner, to be safe and get the issue resolved. So on all of these, the chief can step in if I'm at all getting any of these wrong, but this is a high priority. WASPIC stands for the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And not to, so it's important that first one is not to go back to where we were before 2021, but to just do a nuanced change to help us with those juveniles who are actually suspects or witnesses in a situation. The second one is, if I understand this correctly, I know just a little bit about each of these items. But the state Supreme Court is proposing caseload standards that really require us, and by us I mean the state, to have 70% more public defenders by this July. Logistically, it just doesn't work. There are not that many people out there seeking to be a public defender. So we are asking, and as the Association of Washington Cities is also asking the legislature to step in and put more reasonably attained goals on this situation, rather than reaching so far that it will just pretty much bring the whole system to a halt, I believe. The next option is a repeat, continue to fund, expand options for the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. As many of you heard, even if we hire someone who is not already a police officer today, it will be 14 months on average before we can get them through the academy and out on the street. That's too long. So I know in hearing all the political ads ad nauseum, everyone's talking about, recruit. We actually need to remind them that where the state needs to help us is with the academy, not so much with, although the recruiting's nice, but the gap is once we've recruited them, getting police officers out on the street. And the last one is a WASPIC item that Chief mentioned, and that's WASPIC is seeking for some air support for those agencies that help all the rest of us. And it's just a reminder chiming in from us that Sumner Police does use that assistance from the counties near us for that air support.
Can you tell me what air support means?
The helicopters, I think, right?
Helicopters are in some
Fixed wing-
cases
fixed
fixed
wing.
wing. We definitely benefit being right on the border with King County. They're very generous with their helicopter for the Pierce County agencies.
We wouldn't have any place to park a helicopter anyway.
And nor would we want one. They're expensive.
That's a quick question. Just on the first one, I just didn't, can you tell me what RCW 1340, 740 was trying to fix? Because I wasn't aware there was a problem with juveniles before 2021. Or is it, I just don't know the background.
Yeah, he.
Chief, you take my chair there.
So it's basically passed by the legislature, dubbed juvenile access to attorneys. And it would fall under the state agency of Office of Public Defense. And any law enforcement that encounters any juvenile under the age of 18 that desires to either request to search an item or a vehicle, something in their possession, or to discuss with them anything related to a criminal case, would require first that the law enforcement put them in touch with an attorney. And that's been done again through the Office of Public Defense. There's an 800 number, call, you wait for somebody to call you back. Could be somebody in Eastern Washington, it's throughout the state, different public that work for the State Office of Public Defense. So basically, one of these, it sounds great, that sounds great to the legislatures, and they in fact passed it, despite WASPIC swapped a number of organizations' concerns. What we've experienced is what this does, and ODP basically just tells every juvenile, don't say anything, don't let them search your backpack, don't let them into your house for a party, there's nothing, right? And so, again, we want to ensure adult or juvenile alike, we're sworn to uphold the Constitution, right, and protect those rights. Everyone's aware of the right to remain silent, the right to have an attorney, right? So it's the same with the juvenile. But what this does is it basically created, in practice, an absolute prohibition. Because it doesn't allow the parents to override. When we show up at a fight at a skate park, okay, you tell me who's the suspect and who's the victim, when they're all pointing fingers at each other. We can't. So if I talk to somebody and they were the suspect, well, guess what? I just violated their rights. But I didn't know that unless I can talk to them. Maybe it's the kid with the bloody nose, right? Kid shoplifting booze at Fred Meyer. Can't ask him about it. Can't ask to search. So we have to rely on other best available evidence, video, stuff like that. We were able to, what we're asking the legislature is basically, this is just a snippet of it, but restore some balance, right? Restore some balance back. Maybe let us at least figure out who's innocent, let's at least talk to them. And maybe once we put a juvenile in custody, like we do an adult, then we read them the rights, put them in contact with the Office of Public Defense. But this is just even question or a request to search, which they have the absolute right to say no to. But anyway, so it's just, and also allowing parents to act on the child's behalf. So if your child does something wrong, we contact public defense, they say, don't talk. And you say, yeah, I didn't raise you like that. Yes, you were. You're going to cooperate. You're going to talk. That permission doesn't matter because this attorney spoke in infinite, dispositive no. And so there's a little bit of imbalance there.
Thank you, Brad. Anybody else? Any questions?
One more.
One more for Carmen.
And this one is kind of not a light one, it's a very complicated one, but it doesn't take up a lot of space on the agenda, and that's a repeat again. Incentivize affordable housing supply. We all want affordable housing. We're asking for the legislature to seek incentive rather than regulations. We're looking for the carrots rather than the sticks. The reality is you put too many sticks and regulations within a transit area, as Bill mentioned earlier, it then starts to work in conflict actually with our town center plan and slow down affordable housing. The other thing is, too many barriers, someone just goes and builds in Bonnie Lake where there isn't any transit, and then those people are seeking, how do I get to the train station? So it actually works in reverse of generating transit-oriented development and affordable housing. So that's what we're asking for, is that incentive. I know you mentioned you think they're gonna head more towards incentives than regulations this year, so fingers
Yeah, I
crossed.
think so. I mean, I think the interesting balance this year on housing will be, and everybody knows how hard the housing issue is right now, from home ownership all the way through homelessness. There'll be a strong push on rent control or rent stabilization, with, I think, the multifamily development community saying, if you mandate rent control, we will just build less and we'll go to Idaho. We'll go, because a lot of the larger builders, they're regional or national companies, and so they're trying to figure out what's the balance between consumer protection on rents, but also balancing that with incentives to make sure that people can still build in the state of Washington. And that's a really tricky balance, but I think that'll be the major kind of focus on housing this year.
Great.
So that's the main section, just a little bit about what's below it. Just some general language, that's some of the language I might be able to move up to balance out PFAS a little bit about the logistics. And then I actually reference our partners, the Association of Washington Cities, WASPIC, SHAPE, I haven't mentioned them before, the Southtown Housing Affordability Partners. I'd actually recommend we remove WCIA. They opted, instead of doing their own agenda this year, to work with AWC. So I actually have essentially the same agenda on here twice. Those will become links in the final agenda, so the legislators, if they're looking online, can easily go over to those agendas. So I sent those in a previous email. If you get a chance, take a look. You might not agree 100% with it, but just let me know if there's any in there so bothering you that we shouldn't link or connect to them. And then finally, because this is Councilmember Brown's legacy, he always asks that we send this to all legislators, and a lot of them may not know where Sumner is. Who could not know where Sumner is? But hence the map.
And you always do a good job, Carmen.
Thank you. Anything else finally, or anything I missed from either of you?
And you're off the hook.
All right.
This will be coming back on November 18th for adoption.
On the map, it doesn't really show 167 going towards Tacoma.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like River Road there. Yeah.
Or is there a way
Or the gateway. Yeah, let me look at that.
To show that it's not just going north.
Right.
Because that's one of our main features for the MIC.
That's a good point. And I also noticed, I used to have a little star, and I think when I transferred this over from 24, the little star that is Sumner fell off. So I'll add the star.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, utility discussion, last thing on the agenda. I call on Administrative Services Director Jeff Steffens and City Administrator Jason Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a continuation from our discussion a couple weeks ago where we had FCS here to present some utility billing recommendations. Chris cannot join us tonight, so Jeff and Michael are going to pinch hit for them. We've tried to simplify this presentation to make it a little easier to understand and guide us through our conversation tonight. I see that Mr. Steffens has promoted himself with FCS. Be a vice principal since he's filling in for Chris tonight.
Yes, a new
Multiple titles, same rate of pay. One heartbeat away. Yeah, that's true. Thank you for allowing us to take a second opportunity to present this information. As Jason mentioned, the idea is to take what's a really complex topic that you heard last time and maybe provide some clarity. And I know I am what's standing between you and going home and eating Halloween candy, so try to move through this as quickly as possible. So really the idea is to kind of give an overview of our rate study and our rate study process, go through the 2025 proposed billing rates, once again look at the alternative billing methodologies, proposed low-income discount program, and then a summary of some recommendations, talk about next steps. And as Jason mentioned, we will be providing some recommendations tonight, and they are pretty much really pared down from what you saw last time. So real quickly, the rate study process, the idea is the city of Sumner, I think really correctly, does this every 2 years. This is the second year of that rate study process. We do them opposite of the budget so we don't overwhelm everyone. And the idea is we take our fiscal policies, we look at what it costs to run an individual water, sewer, or storm utility, and that creates a revenue requirement that makes sure Michael knows how much money he needs to run his utility for the upcoming year. That's paired with our customer data, so that's looking at our current customer accounts, projected customer growth, how many customers we have that are residential, how many that we have are commercial, how many that we have are multifamily, and then also looking at what those customers use as far as water consumption. We take that, we add it to the way we bill, and that helps us design rates. And the key in this graph, and I didn't really, this was Chris's graph and I didn't want to change it too much, is that if you change one of these things, it has implications on everything else. So if our forecasts change, it changes our revenue requirements. If we have more customers, then it's going to change what our rates are because we've got more people that are paying into the system. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. So really on a high level, the recommendation for the 2025 rates is water is a 4% increase, sewer is a 4.5% increase, and storm is a 6% increase. And what that looks like on a simple sample residential monthly bill, this is at 7 CCF, so this is what our average residential home would be charged. Currently, we're looking at about $147, $148 a month. That would go up to $154 with these proposed rates, which is a change of $6.72 a month. And this is, once again, average residential. There will be some that will go up more, some that will go up less. So really, if you do nothing else tonight, take nothing else away, this is where we need to be. We need to take these rate increases. This is what the budget is based on, these rates moving forward. This was a slide that Chris had, and I think it's important to look and always, we want to see how we compare to our neighbors. As mentioned before, we're kind of in the middle, and we will probably continue to be in the middle with our 25 rates. As you can see, we don't have any 25 rates for everyone else, but assuming they all go up, a similar amount, we'll still probably be right where we were before.
So I just paid my utility bill and it was $136 a month. And I was just wondering why it's in at $147.
Because you use less water than average.
Is it the water?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's based on 700
Yeah.
cubic feet of water usage.
So this is an average bill.
Yeah.
You're less than average.
Just below average.
Congratulations. In this instance, being below average is probably good. And I'm assuming, if we looked at everyone else up here, there would probably be some that would maybe be on the higher side than that.
I have 2 teenage daughters.
There you go. 2 teenage daughters will do it. That puts you higher than average.
Yeah, we're like a multi-family.
222.
What? 4 kids in the house.
There you go. Thank you, Councilmember Elfers, for paying more than Councilmember Pateta. Okay, so on to the next is really looking at the alternative billing methodologies, and this was a different phase to the FCS study that we added in. And the idea in this was really looking at this middle section of this rate study process. And this is something that we've not done before. I mean, I've worked here 20 plus years and we have billed utility rates the exact same way for 20 years. So the idea in having FCS look at this was, is the way we bill transparent? Is it equitable amongst our customers? Is it efficient for the city and our staff? And then the other thing added in, and we've heard for years, was a low income discount program. What does that look like? How would that affect rates? So the idea in doing this study, as I got the thumbs up and the thumbs down there, was when we look at the way this works, was we're going to adjust the methodology, but we're not going to impact the customers. We're just going to see how that methodology would change rates, but the revenue we collect is the same. So if we make this adjustment, Michael's not getting any more or any less money to operate his utilities off of. And the idea is not only for the utility as a whole, but also within the customer class. So when we're making adjustments on residential bills, if we were gonna get $10 million from residential bills before, we're gonna get $10 million now. We're just divvying up the pie a little bit. Maybe Councilmember Potato will have to pay a little bit more, Councilmember Alpers will pay a little bit less. Probably the opposite of that, but we'll pretend for now. Okay, so as I mentioned, we provided FCS 4 years of customer data, so this was really data-driven analysis, and this is why we hired them. This is beyond our scope of what we can do here as a city. We gave them, the number of accounts and the revenue by each classification, so they knew how many were residential, how many were commercial, and how much money we collected from each of those customer groups, because the idea was that revenue stays the same. And then the number of accounts in each one, and the number of accounts, the number of services, so sewer accounts, water accounts, and then water consumption. In pulling this information for them, we looked and we found some inconsistencies in our data. And really that was on multifamily accounts. Because, back in the 1990s or the 80s or whenever all this was designed the way we do things, multifamily was pretty simple, right? You had a residential home, a house was residential, and an apartment complex was multifamily. Well, now we have townhomes, we have ADUs, we have mother-in-law apartments, we have apartment complexes, we have apartments that are individually metered, we have townhomes that are individually metered. We have no real set definition of what is what, and they get billed differently depending on which classification you're in. So we felt in order to really make a clear decision on multifamily accounts and how we're going to bill them, we need to define first what a multifamily account is and then reassess the data. So in red there, the only thing that we're giving tonight is recommendations on single family accounts. So this is a change from the last time. So we'll keep that in mind. So when we look specifically at the water utility, the way that we bill water is it's actually fairly simple. There's a base fee, and that's determined by the size of your meter, and then you pay a consumption fee based on how much water you use. And as Chris mentioned, we have a tiered rate structure. So as you use more water per unit, it gets more expensive. And the idea is to encourage conservation, and this is something suggested, recommended, required by the Department of Ecology. We couldn't remember the exact verb that they used, but so the way that we currently have, we have 3 tiers. The first tier is from 1 to 10 CCF, tier 2 is 11 to 20, and tier 3 is 20 and above. And you can see the per unit charges. If you take, once again, that average homeowner average bill, they pay a $29.12 base fee for a 3/4 inch meter. If they use 7 CCF, that's $47 a month, $46.97 a month. In looking back, there is no rhyme or reason as to why we chose these tiers to be this way. This is the way they've always been, probably because, it's 10, 20, and more than 20. It makes sense, right? So what FCS Group did is they looked at our data and they said, really, based on the number of customers we have, how people consume water, where should our tiers be set? And how should we change the dollar amount of each, the rates, each of those tiers? So this is what is proposed, and this is what staff's recommending, and that's to have tier 1 be 1 to 5 CCF, tier 2 to be 6 to 16 CCF, and tier 3 is anything over 16 CCF. And as you can see, the charge per CCF changes. It gets higher as you use more and more water. Those people that are really high water users have a much bigger impact to the system. From a volume charge, and should be paying more per unit. In looking once again at our average residential bill, you see that it's about the same. I mean, there's a 57-cent a month change. I could do that math in my head. Pretty minimal.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you go back?
So really, in essence, the proposed, if I'm hearing what you're saying for clarity in my own brain, the proposed is it's more the ecological thing, so it's based on usage.
Correct.
So let's just say the city only gets $10 no matter which one we do, but the lower one drives conservation.
Correct. Yep, we collect the same amount of revenue no matter which option you pick there, but the idea is based on the current customers, the way we're using water, the bottom proposed rate is really the way that we should set up our rates, and it's to encourage conservation.
Okay.
And if you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
Well, I have 4 kids, but they're not taking a bath at my house now.
I was just curious, so in this model, if my daughter takes a 30-minute shower every day, which she does sometimes, unless we're on her, I should charge her $5 or $6, how much do you think?
Probably second mortgage. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, really the idea is that those are having a bigger impact to the system and are using more water should be paying more, and those that maybe use a little bit less should be paying a little less. And I can show you, this next slide really shows what the impacts of that change are. As you can see, it's not overly drastic on what it changes. A large portion of our customers are probably on that lower consumption end, and they would see, you know, a little bit of a decrease in their bill. Almost an equal number see a little bit of an increase, you know, less than $10. And then there's I don't know, it's probably not you, but there is one customer up there that's a really high volume user, and they're going to see a fairly sizable increase. But if you think out of almost 2,800 residential accounts, I mean, that's by far the statistical outlier of someone that's those top 17 that are really high water users, and they're currently probably not paying their fair share. Any questions about water?
Didn't this help address like low income?
Yeah, I want to be cautious about correlating this to low income, because I think often there's this sentiment that low income might mean someone that's a low volume, low water consumer. You know, they live home alone, or maybe 2 people live in a house together, which is true. But then you probably have on the other end, you probably have you know, multiple generations living under one household. A big house, lots of people living there, could still be low income, but could use a lot of water. So it's really hard to say one way or another what a low income would look. I would guess that they would probably typically be lower water consumers, but not always. And when we look at, like when we do utility shutoffs, we have customers that run the whole gamut of, you know, size of bills. It's not necessarily that they're shut off and they didn't pay because they have large bills. Some people have small bills. It just depends. I'll quickly talk about sewer. So remember, we basically want to stick with the status quo, which is the 4.5% increase for sewer. The staff recommendation at this time is setting a flat rate for our outside of city single family customers. So these are folks that have Sumner sewer, but get water from Bonnie Lake. And this is a very manual process. We have to get the data from Bonnie Lake. We have to input those. Currently, they pay what a residential Sumner customer would pay, but they pay a 25% surcharge by being outside of city limits. So our proposal is to set them as a flat rate of $98.81. Really, this cuts down on the administrative burden of dealing with these folks. There's about 330 customers that fall within this classification, and that's a rapidly growing group up there as there's more and more development kind of up in that Forest Canyon area. I think it was 270 last year. I mean, it's like 10% a year. It's really gaining a lot of development. Same idea with this. By switching from what we're doing now to a proposed 98.81, revenue neutral for the city. We'll collect the same amount of money from that group of customers that we would if we didn't make the change. But from a staff standpoint, this is considerably easier.
So do they get 2 bills, one from Bonnie Lake and one from Sumner?
They do. Yeah, and they get billed every other month from us.
Yeah. So then there would be what, 190?
Yep, 98.81 times 2.
Just gotta ask this. So if you don't pay your water bill for a couple months, the city can maybe shut off your water. But if you're not doing the water, what do you do if they don't pay their sewer bill?
That's great. It's a great question. So yeah, we put a big cork in it. We don't have a lot that we can do, and you know, there was a neighborhood Facebook page that says, "Don't bother paying your bill. They can't turn off your utilities. Sumner can't do anything. Don't even pay it." Well, what we can do is we can lien the property, and that's what we've gone through. We're in the process of putting liens on some of these homes that are in arrears. But yeah, we cannot turn off their water for not paying our sewer bill. It's illegal, not allowed to do it.
Nor can we ask Bonnie Lake to do that on our behalf. We did research that because that
We
was our
asked.
goal. It's like, well, then Bonnie Lake can turn them off. State law doesn't allow us to do
Yeah,
that.
and I think they would have been willing to do it for us, but not allowed.
I had to ask.
That was a good question.
It's kind of scary to see what they answered, though.
Okay, so now into the low income discount program. So there's a lot of information up here, but really some of our takeaways from the last conversation was I think the council is in favor of offering some sort of low income program. But the idea is that they didn't want to do it and have it be detrimental to all the other ratepayers. So what we're proposing is to link our program to the county. This allows us to administer it quite easily. Doesn't take a lot of staff time to check income verification. We'll basically go with, if you have a discounted property tax bill with the county, then you'd be eligible for the discount through us. And we can easily get that information from the county. We have already done it. It's 165 customers. We've already figured out even what account numbers they are. And it's simple for us to apply that discount. There would be no application process, no paperwork anyone needs to fill out. You pass this January 1st, they get the discount, simple as that. Our proposal is that we would pull that data twice a year and we would just update them as they go. And if someone came in between and said, hey, I moved into Sumner and I'm eligible for a discount, we could quickly look up on the tax assessor's website and say, yes, you certainly are. We're going to apply the discount moving forward. Really easy to do. The other thing that we thought we would do, and we probably should do, so this will be a Carmen thing, but is really promote that people can get discounts. They can work with the county and they can get a discount on their property taxes and also a discount on their utilities. And the county actually goes around and they hold these tax exemption seminars. I think it's in Edgewood. There's one in Edgewood coming up, so we'd look to probably do something similar here if we haven't already done that. And what we've determined is with either of the discount options below, which I will explain, we think at least for 2025, kind of the revenue that we would lose out on is kind of within the margin of error. And then any long-lasting impacts of this would just be kind of figured into the next rate study moving forward. So then when we look at the discount options, we have two that would fit within this category. One's listed as recommended by staff, but really either one would be fine and easy for us to implement. So the first one would be just taking 25% of the base fees. That would be a combined discount of $29.19 a month. So about $350 a year. If we took 25% of the total bill, it takes a little bit more effort for us because we've got to add the discount to more rates. The other thing is having it just on the base fees, once again, encourages conservation because you pay the full fare for your consumption. But if we did 25% of the total bill, once again, using kind of that average residential customer, that would be about $39 a month or $464 a year. And once again, if you were qualified for this program, if you were a heavy water user, of course, your discount would be greater because your bill would be greater. So with that, I'll kind of go over, this is my little highlight summary. So for water rates, we'd be looking at a 4% increase, and then the ask is to adjust the residential consumption tiers. For sewer, it'd be a 4.5% increase, and then the ask is to add in a flat rate for outside city customers. Storm, the rates are 6%. There's no proposed changes to how we bill storm. And then for the low income discount program, at least for 2025, is to start with offering residents who qualify for the Pierce County property tax exemption to get this discount, and then setting that charge at 25% of the base fee or 25% of the total bill, whatever the council decides. As far as next steps, as Jason mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back on the 18th with an ordinance that will establish the utility rates. Obviously, the utility rates will change depending on some of your choices tonight. And then we'd be bringing an ordinance that would be updating the municipal code, putting in that low income discount program, and then also adding in a definition of what a multifamily account is. We would then take that and probably in the beginning of next year, make appropriate account changes, look at our multifamily accounts and see if they need to stay multifamily, if some of them are gonna go residential, rerun the data, get it back to FCS group, and then come back with some additional alternatives. One of those, which we talked about before, was just a single water rate for multifamily and commercial. And then looking at some sewer alternatives for all of our customer classes, whether that be a flat rate, reconfiguring the multifamily rate, some of those things. But we really need to get our data in order before we do that. And with that, if you have any questions, you can call or email Chris.
I know how people could find out about that tax exemption seminar.
I know that we posted it on our Twitter account, told people to go there. I'm sure the county has it. I'm not sure where else to find it.
I'm sure it's on the assessor's website, but I'll double check here. Well,
Yeah, and just,
and I've actually done this paperwork for my relatives. It's not that complex, so a lot of people can work through it on their own. The seminar is really to help those that may be struggling or have specific questions.
So there is something just on the website that you can fill out.
I feel like it was coming up even like this in November, right?
Yeah.
November 14th was the one in Edgewood.
Utility
Edgewood, at City Hall?
included in a utility bill.
Edgewood City Hall, yep.
There you go.
Could we get Pierce County to do a workshop in the Sumner area?
Yeah, we'll be asking them to do that. They've been going around to all the cities lately and trying to do that.
Yeah, that wasn't my idea. I think that's something we already talked about, but I'll take credit for it. So. Any other thoughts?
Any other-
Discount program, we need a little bit of a direction on, it sounds like everyone's kind of in favor of changing the water tiers, the flat rate for outside city of Sumner sewer customers. Some head nods on that. So really, what I'd be looking for is some direction on which of the two discount options you prefer, whether it's the full bill or just the base fees alone, because this will drive how we being I, write the ordinance. So,
I'll give my 2 cents. Is it 2 cents or 1 cent? I
I
don't
mean,
know. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. I
75 cents.
75 cents? Oh, wow, it's gotten expensive. I think, I like the recommendation. I think that's good. I really think the incentivizing, like, to use less water is good. I think if it's less staff time, it costs less money to administer and you're getting something on the books to do it. So I really appreciate that. I think it's simple. And that's a meaningful discount, $29 a month for somebody who's getting a tax increase a little bit and a little bit of that here and there. So it's something on a tight income, that's all right.
3 minutes, go ahead, Pat.
Go ahead, Pat.
I like the base fee also, and I really appreciate you simplifying it, because I spent hours putting the graphs together, like, and trying to figure out how that all works, so I appreciate that.
thanks, happy to help.
Yep.
Carla?
I agree. I think it looks good. You simplified the whole presentation, which makes it very easy to follow and just say yay or nay. I would start this year with the base and just see what happens, and, that always tells you what you can do in following years.
I'll say also I'm good with the base, but this is all 25. What happens in 26?
It's a good question. So we will be doing the entire rate study again, sometime in 25 to set the 26 rates.
Correct.
We have projections on what we think they will be, but really we got to get a whole new set of inputs, look at the data, and that'll drive the rates moving forward. We'll go through the whole process again.
That was a great question. But I support the base charges, the 25% off the base charges.
Barbara?
I got a secondary question, the base.
All right, great, you're up.
So when we started this whole thing, we started with 4% water, 4.5 sewer, 6 storm. But when you do the tier thing, we drop the CCF, so it's cheaper. So how is that 4% more money? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
Because you're saying we want a 4% increase in water, but then we dropped the CCF.
6 to 10, that's
And it went from, let's say at 255, now it's down to 216.
yeah, but the
So I'm trying to wrap my head around why is that?
yeah, so the third tier is significantly higher at 31 cents more, and the third tier kicks in sooner than it would have before. So FCS, Correct. Yes.
There's also an increase to the base fee year over year.
Yeah.
Because these are, I don't know, these are 24,
These are
25 numbers.
25 rates, and you look at that base fee of $29.12. That includes the increase. But yeah, the idea is it's revenue neutral. Whichever option you pick, we collect the same amount of money, and that would be reflective of a 4% increase over what we got in 2024.
And then I guess the last thing is on the storm, we didn't really talk, we're just requesting a 6% storm.
Yeah, we had no changes to storm. Storm is a flat rate. All residential customers pay the exact same for storm, so there's no real need to make that equitable, to make it easier to understand. It's one of our more simplistic utilities. So
Residential, same, commercial.
commercial is more complicated, yeah.
So there's no changes to the commercial rates.
Not at this point, no.
Just the standard bill.
Only residential, then we'll come back.
$2.50.
Yeah, we'll come back with both multifamily and commercial in 2025. The idea is, I think that whatever we do for multifamily, the commercial will look somewhat similar, and we don't want to adjust one and have it, not be the same.
On multifamily, can you require that each unit is billed?
So the way that the utility bill works is it's one bill per meter. So that's the idea with, essentially the definition of a multifamily account is going to be multiple dwelling units on 1 meter makes it multifamily. If you have a one-to-one relationship, then it's residential. Because it's difficult, we have some 1,800 to 2,000 square foot 4-bedroom apartments in town, and we have some 1,000 square foot 3-bedroom homes. So the idea is, if it's a one-to-one relationship, it's residential. Multiple to one, it's gonna be multifamily. I feel like that's the simplest way to do it.
Anybody else?
One last comment. So when we make these changes, I'm assuming somehow we'll get the notice out to the residents here in town. For me, when I looked at it, I thought, well, this will be interesting, because just today, my husband said, geez, last month, our bill was $450. It's just me and him. And today it's $147. But guess what we have? We have sprinklers, and we water that grass because I like it green. Tina will tell you. I have a lot of plants. So now I got to outweigh what I spend on the plants, and do I let them die, or do I put it on the water bill? But seriously, the whole conservation element kicks in. It does make you start thinking about how we're using these natural resources, and we should. So I think that this will drive the right behaviors, right? And Andy's kids will take shorter showers, but there it is. Yeah, so a lot of sprinklers in
Keep
this
the
town.
flowers watered though.
I will. I'll water the flowers, but I'm gonna let the grass die.
Alright. Anything else, you guys? Alright. That being said, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:06.
Just don't light anything.
Yeah, I don't like it. Yes, we talked about it a lot. We all that brain power.